Nigel Farage was here last year, obviously spearheaded Brexit. What are your thoughts on what people in the UK think about that? Are people blaming Brexit for their woes on these issues?
I don't think it was a great solution. And in fact, I would argue that it was only put forth. David Cameron basically said, we'll have a vote on this. It's my belief that it came just after the vote for Scottish independence, and the Scottish turned that down. Like, they made a big noise. They negotiated a better deal with the UK, and then they rejected the Scottish exit from Britain. And so I think that David Cameron thought that Britain could do the same thing within Europe, make a big noise, say we'll do this thing. You put it to the vote.
Appear magnanimous in a sense.
Yeah. You kind of negotiate a better deal. And the people voted for it, I think to many people's surprise, And there were pros and cons to it. For me and for the people I know, I think maybe more cons than pros. I think it is hard on the economy. But in truth, the British economy is not doing a whole lot worse than other parts of the world right now. There is higher inflation. Some of the real problems in the UK are just that people's mortgages are generally tied to a floating rate. Like, that's the way you borrow in the UK. You can lock in for 2 or 5
You've
years.
talked about that. It's not this for people who are from the United States, for example, here. The 30-year fixed mortgage, you're locked. That doesn't exist in the UK.
It's not an option. And so, when people in the UK say they've got a fixed mortgage, they mean for 2 or 5 years. And then
that seems dangerous.
It does. It's an interesting thing because in the very long run, being exposed to the floating rate tends to be a bit cheaper than being exposed to the fixed rate, except when mortgage rates are at historic lows.
What's happened in the last 15 years?
Yeah, when you can borrow at 2-3%, it's like, you really think it's going lower? Maybe it's time to lock.
For people who are here, who are saying, hey, I'm from the US, I'm from the UK, I'm from Australia, it's overpriced, they've taken away our freedoms, we don't see the future. What's the use case for the people that you're talking to and your friends with in London for why they are in London when they're doing so much else in the world, do you think?
I'm originally from Ireland, and many of my friends, they're all like Italian, Greek, Spanish, Indian, Russian, whatever they might be. And they all came to London, and they like it in London because there's a very good lifestyle, at least if you're kind of well-to-do within London. And, many of them have bought homes, they're raising children, and, sort of the economic tide goes out. And I think there are many who are kind of, holding out to see if things will come back. Equally, they're very mobile people, like you kind of, in fact, when I go back and look at during the credit crunch, there was a huge loss of jobs within the city of London, there were no jobs for bankers for a while. Many of my friends, they were from all over the world, and when the credit crunch kicked in, they lose a job, they hunt around a bit for another job, and then they just look globally, because
Right.
if you're from Germany and you're living in London and you get offered a job in Dubai or Singapore or wherever, I mean, why not?
Go where you're treated best.
Yeah, and really, I think within the financial industry, to a certain extent, the people are kind of mercenaries. Like, they turn up to work to make money, and if you take the money away, they go to where it's gone.
Isn't that natural for anybody? I mean, if you take anybody's money away, they're gonna go somewhere else. Now, you think?
Say that, but actually, I was a little bit surprised. The average American lives either 18 miles or minutes from their mother's home. So you think that people can and do move all over, but they don't really move as much as might economically make sense for them. And, Americans are actually more mobile than people in other parts of the world. So I think you and I can take a world view, where you kind of go, well, gosh, I can, the kind of work I do and the way I live and where my friends are, I can kind of just look around and live wherever I want to. The majority of people really don't think that way. They live kind of where...
Well, we're working on it.
Where they landed.
My father's here, and I mean, the idea that he would have gone to Mexico 10 years ago, he wouldn't have even considered it. Now he spends half his year, he bought a property, and, he's almost like, if the Kings keep going the way they're going, I'm moving there full time.
Now, did you give him the push? Is that?
I think that us doing it is probably an inspiration. I mean, when people see you, it's one thing to talk about it. It's one thing to watch the videos. But I think when people see you take an action, I think that's probably the best way to do it.
If you've never moved anywhere, it seems like shocking and wild,
right.
you know. But once you've moved a few times, I don't know, eventually you call a mover, they load your stuff up, and off you go.
And I really think everyone, people moving to Miami. If you're moving, you might as well just move. You have, I think, the best situation, being an Irish citizen. So you could just go and live in London without having to have the UK passport, which perhaps geopolitically could be at some point a little dicey. I mean, Irish, everyone loves the Irish. You can go the EU direction. You can also, the only passport besides the UK, they can live in the UK.
Well, it's an interesting thing because when I grew up, it was a terrible passport. I actually have 3 passports, but I have a US and Irish passport when I was growing up. And, the good one was the American passport. You could go anywhere in the world with that. And the Irish one, there was lots of stamping of the passport and standing in lines and explaining that you're really just on holiday and not moving there.
Because in the late 70s and 80s, it was much worse than it is today.
Oh, for like 800 years, people left Ireland.
Up until, I mean, people were 50 today are like, it was tough back then.
Well, it's funny. I left Ireland in 1997, and for very logical reasons. I felt it rained too much. And so I moved in 97, and up until that point...
To London?
No, to the United States.
Okay,
and in Ireland, there were kind of 2 things you could watch on TV back then. There was Dallas and EastEnders, so it's a rather depressing idea to move to London rather than the United States when you're Irish. It's like sun, convertibles, cowboy hats, So Baywatch, where are you going? It's not long.
That's funny, yeah.
So I moved out of Ireland in 97, and that was almost a turning point at which Ireland became a country that people moved out of to it becoming a country that people moved to. And I go home now and I almost don't recognize, I find it very funny, like you'll meet people from all over the world and they'll walk up to you and speak with a strong Dublin accent, and you're like, that never happened years ago,
Oh, it's becoming more like London, it seems now, in a mini scale, much more international, and developing very, I think by some metrics, the most expensive place to live and the highest incomes in the world by some metrics. Remarkable turnaround.